There are things you lose in this world that can never be found again. A wedding ring dropped in the ocean, a photograph burned in a fire, a child taken too soon. But what if I told you that somewhere, in some other version of reality, those things still exist? That's where people like me come in. My name is Ethan Cross, and I'm a dimension diver. For 15 years, I've made my living doing what most people think is impossible, traveling between parallel worlds to retrieve what's been lost. A stolen painting that was destroyed in this reality, but survived in another. A prototype invention that failed here but succeeded there. Once, I even found someone's childhood dog, 20 years after it died, still young and healthy in a world where veterinary science took a different turn. The job pays well. It has to. Every dive is a gamble with your sanity. You see, the human brain isn't designed to process multiple realities. When you cross between dimensions, you don't just see another world. You see the ghost of every choice you never made, every path you didn't take. Some divers go mad after a handful of jumps. Others lose themselves completely, unable to remember which reality is home. I've done 347 dives. My record is clean. My success rate is 98%. But there's one rule I've never broken. I don't dive for people. Until today. Viktor Marlowe sat across from me in my office, which wasn't really an office, just a converted warehouse in the industrial sector, where the dimensional barriers were thin enough to make jumping easier. He looked like money, tailored suit, silver hair, the kind of watch that costs more than most people's houses. But his eyes looked like grief. "Mr. Cross," his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands, "I need you to find my daughter." I set down my coffee. "Mr. Marlowe, I appreciate you coming here, but I don't do recovery for living people. It's too complicated, too many variables." "She's not living." He pulled out a photograph and placed it on my desk. "Not in this world, anyway." The girl in the photo was maybe 10 years old. Dark curls, bright eyes, a gap-toothed smile that looked like sunshine captured on film. She wore a yellow dress and held an ice cream cone. "Lily," he said, softly. "My daughter. She died 3 years ago. Car accident. I was driving." I pushed the photo back toward him. "I'm sorry for your loss, but there are other worlds where she's alive." His voice cracked. "You've told your clients that yourself. It's in your promotional materials. What's lost in one world may thrive in another. That's what you say. For objects, for things, not for people. Why not?" I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city sprawled beneath a sky that was slightly the wrong shade of blue, a side effect of living near thin dimensional barriers. Reality bled at the edges here. "Because people are complicated," I said. "You can't just swap one version for another. They have memories, connections, entire lives built in their home dimension. Pulling them out would be like ripping a plant out by its roots. What if she wants to come? They never want to come, not really, not when they understand what it means." Marlowe stood. He was taller than I realized. "I'm prepared to offer you $10 million, $5 million now, $5 million when you bring her back." I turned to face him. "Why? Why do this? She's not your daughter. She's someone else's daughter who happens to look like yours." "Because I can't live with what I've done." His voice was barely a whisper. "Every morning I wake up and remember that she's gone because I looked at my phone for 3 seconds. 3 seconds, that's all it took. I see her every night in my dreams, and every morning I wake up to a world where she doesn't exist. If there's a version of her out there, living, breathing, laughing, I need to know. I need to bring her home." There was something in his voice that I recognized, a desperation that went beyond money or reason. I knew that desperation intimately. "I'll need a week to prepare," I heard myself say, "and there are no guarantees. I might find her, I might not, and if I do find her, she might not be who you remember." "I understand." He didn't. Nobody ever did. "You learn to live in the world you have," I said. "Not the world you wish existed. Your daughter died here,
in this reality. That's a wound that doesn't heal, Mr. Marlowe. But tearing holes in reality won't fix it. It'll just make the bleeding worse." He sat in silence for a long time. Then he pulled out a checkbook. "Keep the $5 million, he said quietly. "You did the job. You found her. That I can't accept the answer isn't your fault. I don't want your money. Take it anyway. Consider it payment for honesty." He stood up and walked to the door, then paused. "Do you have children, Mr. Cross?" "I did, once." He nodded slowly. "Then you understand." "Yes, I understand." After he left, I sat alone in my office for a long time. The dimensional anchor sat on my desk, still holding the coordinates to the world where Sarah might be alive. 2 branches clockwise, 1 jump. I picked up the anchor, held it in my hands, felt its weight. Then I deleted the coordinates. Some things are lost in every reality, and some doors are meant to stay closed, not because opening them is impossible, but because what you find on the other side will destroy you more thoroughly than grief ever could. Hope is the cruelest dimension of all. I locked up my office and walked out into the street. The sky was still the wrong shade of blue, and reality still bled at the edges. But this was my world, my reality, the one where I'd made my choices and lived with their consequences. Somewhere, in some other dimension, maybe there was a version of me who'd jumped, who'd found Sarah, who'd tried to bring her home. I hoped he was happy, but I suspected he was just as lost as I would have been. That night, I went home to an empty apartment and looked at Sarah's photograph one last time. Then I put it in a drawer, closed it gently, and walked away. Some doors close. Some wounds never heal. Some daughters exist only in memory. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept the world you live in, even when you know that somewhere, in infinite parallel realities, there's a version where everything turned out right. I was done diving. It was time to learn to live on solid ground.
You're lying. Divers can hear things between dimensions if they listen carefully. Information bleeds through. I can't promise it's her, but the description matches. She gave me a sad smile. Maybe you should finish your own search before you help someone else with theirs. She walked back to her house, and I stood frozen on an alien street in a world that wasn't mine. I could jump. Right now. 2 branches clockwise. I could see if she was real. I could find my daughter. My hands shook as I adjusted my dimensional anchor. The coordinates were easy enough to calculate. 2 jumps, maybe 3, an hour of travel time. 15 years of grief, possibly answered. I set the coordinates. I stood there, finger over the activation button. And then I thought about Viktor Marlowe, waiting in my office, hope eating him alive. I thought about the 3 other divers he'd sent, the Lily who'd faded away after 6 months. I thought about what I'd become if I found Sarah alive in another world, what I'd be willing to do, the lines I'd cross, the realities I'd break. Some doors should stay closed. I reset the coordinates for home and jumped. Viktor Marlowe was pacing in my office when I materialized. He spun around, eyes wild with hope. "Did you find her?" I pulled off my dimensional harness and set it down carefully. My hands were steady, even though everything inside me was screaming. "I found 4 versions of her," I said. "One where you died instead, one where she survived but was severely disabled, one where she didn't know you, and one where she was alive and healthy. The 4th one." She said no. The hope in his eyes flickered. "What?" "She's not your daughter, Mr. Marlowe.
She's someone else's daughter who happens to look like yours, and she asked me to give you a message." I pulled out the photograph he'd given me and placed it on the desk. "She forgives you. Every version of her across every dimension forgives you, but she can't be what you need her to be." Marlowe's face crumpled. He sat down heavily, suddenly looking much older. "I was so sure. I thought if I could just bring her back." "You can't bring people back. That's not how it works. You can only find echoes, shadows, things that look right but feel wrong." "Then what do I do?" I thought about Sarah, about the coordinates still stored in my dimensional anchor, about the door I'd chosen not to open.
Third world. Lily was alive and healthy. But Viktor Marlowe wasn't her father. In this reality, he and his wife had divorced before Lily was born. The girl existed, but her connection to Marlowe was severed completely. She wouldn't know him, wouldn't recognize him, wouldn't want to leave with him. Fourth world. Lily was alive, and everything seemed perfect. Same house, same family, same bright smile. I spent 2 days observing, checking for discrepancies. There had to be a catch. There always was. I found it on the 3rd day. I was watching the house from across the street when Lily came outside. She looked directly at me, which shouldn't have been possible. My reality distortion field makes me effectively invisible to people in other dimensions. She crossed the street and stood in front of me. "You're here for me, aren't you?" she said. My blood turned to ice. "You can see me?" "You're not the first." She tilted her head, studying me with eyes that seemed older than 13. "3 others have come. They all had the same look, the same guilt." "I don't understand." "My father, in your world, he keeps sending people, divers like you. He wants me to come back." She smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "I always say no." "Why?" "Because I'm not his daughter. I'm just similar enough to make him hope, and different enough to break his heart. The first diver explained it to me. I'm a placeholder, a bandage on a wound that won't heal." I stared at this impossible girl. "How many times has he done this?" "You're the 4th." She looked down at her hands. "The second diver brought back a version of me. I heard about it. News travels between dimensions if you know how to listen. That Lily lasted 6 months before she started to fade. That's what happens when you don't belong in a reality. You become transparent, then translucent. Then you're just gone." I didn't know. "Now you do." She met my eyes. "Please tell him to stop. Tell him I'm not her. Tell him his daughter is gone, and no amount of diving will bring her back. Tell him—" Her voice caught. "Tell him she forgives him. All of us do. Every version of Lily across every dimension forgives him. But we can't fix what's broken in his world." She turned to walk away. "Wait," I called. "If you know about the other divers, do you know about a girl named Sarah Cross? Brown eyes, 17, cancer patient?" Lily looked back at me with sudden understanding. "You're looking for your daughter, too." I was, a long time ago. "And you never found her?" "No." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "There's a reality 2 branches clockwise from here. I've heard whispers. A girl matching that description. She survived her illness. She's alive." My heart stopped. Started. Stopped again. After he left, I sat alone in the warehouse, staring at Lily's photograph. She looked happy, uncomplicated, the way children look before the world teaches them about loss. I pulled open my desk drawer and took out another photograph, older, more worn. A different girl, older than Lily, maybe 17, brown eyes that matched mine. Sarah, my daughter, dead for 8 years. I'd never told anyone I had a daughter. It was easier that way, easier than explaining why a man who could travel between dimensions, who could find anything lost in any reality, had never tried to find his own child. The truth was simple and terrible. I had tried. 47 times I'd jumped to parallel worlds looking for a version of her that survived the cancer. 47 times I'd found variations of my life, my choices, my failures, but never once did I find her alive. Some things are lost in every reality. That's when I made my rule: never dive for people, because hope is more dangerous than any dimensional instability. But $10 million buys a lot of things, and maybe, just maybe, if I could give Marlowe his daughter back, I could make peace with the fact that I'd never get mine. The preparation took 5 days. I used Marlowe's money to upgrade my equipment: a newer dimensional anchor, military-grade reality stabilizers, enough medication to keep my brain from hemorrhaging when reality started to blur. The theory behind dimension diving is simple, even if the execution is deadly. Every choice creates a branch in reality. Turn left instead of right, and somewhere a parallel universe splits off where you turned right. Most of these branches are nearly identical to ours. The coffee shop on the corner is called Java Junction instead of Coffee Corner, where the president's middle name is spelled differently. But some branches diverge wildly. Technology that never developed here flourished there. Countries that fell here thrived there. People who died here lived there. The trick is finding the right branch, the one where the person you're looking for exists in the way you need them to exist. For Lily Marlowe, that meant finding a reality where, 1, she survived the car accident, 2, she was the right age, should be 13 now, 3, she was similar enough to our Lily to make the substitution convincing, 4, the dimensional barriers were weak enough to allow a crossing. 4 variables, millions of possible realities. I programmed the search parameters into my dimensional scanner and started jumping. The first world I found was close, almost perfect. Lily was alive, 13 years old. She lived in the same house, went to the same school. But when I observed her from a distance, divers learn never to make direct contact on reconnaissance jumps, I noticed something wrong. I was dead. In this reality, Ethan Cross had died in the car accident instead of Lily. She'd survived, but I hadn't. And when I checked the public records, I found that in this world, I'd never become a dimension diver. I'd been an architect, a father, a man who died protecting his daughter. I moved on. The second world was worse. Lily was alive, but she wasn't Lily. The accident had left her with severe brain damage. She existed, but the bright-eyed girl from the photograph was gone. In her place was someone who would need care for the rest of her life. I watched her father, this world's Viktor Marlowe, push her wheelchair through a park. His face was weathered, aged beyond his years, but he was smiling, talking to her about the birds and the trees, even though she gave no sign of understanding. This Marlowe had made peace with his grief by becoming its caretaker. I moved on.